Good. All right. Uh, All right, I'll call to order the Coastal Resilience Committee meeting Tuesday, March 4th, 2025. It's 3:01. Judy is away on the other side of the world, so I'm filling in for her today. Claire Cummings, we just ask that anyone who has anything to say, please use one of the microphones. Remind the committee members to please use your microphones in case anyone is listening in on Zoom or on YouTube. First item on the agenda is public input. Does anyone have any public input? Yeah.
After having posted the Core Neck Road project post, I got a lot of responses, and one of them was a question, which is, what is the status of the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank money? Do we have that in our hands, or are we waiting for it? Same with the Fish and Wildlife. You do?
I asked that question to Allison. Thank you. Yeah. So Allison, sorry, not quite here yet. Do you want me to read you what Allison said?
Please, because I emailed her, but I didn't get a response.
I think you were on this email that I put out because it was part of the Core Neck Road study, but maybe it was just Nigel and Judy and I,
Okay.
but I'll look. I can just share that with everyone or look it up. Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I'm just looking for it now. So you can go on with something else until I find it.
Okay.
It'll just take me a minute. Sorry.
No problem. Any other public input? No. All right. Well, we can circle back to that maybe after we've had a chance to look at the minutes from February 4th. Does anyone have any, or can I have a motion to approve?
So the minutes start off saying the agenda, at the top of the minutes, it says agenda.
Yeah, I saw that.
And you left the N out of my name when I proposed Judy to return as chair. I think all the other spellings are right, but just that particular one that I keep do everything is slow.
I noticed that too. The heading wasn't minutes, it was the agenda.
Yeah.
And sorry, Laurel, to have that conversation. We didn't intend it to become
That's
a meeting.
I'll fix those few things.
Can I have a motion to approve?
Yeah.
So moved.
Any other discussion? All right, all in favor with those changes? Thank you. Mary, do you have that
I-
answer or are you still? It's
I
fine.
found it. I'm
Still
looking at it and wondering
Okay.
if you want me to just send it or read the whole thing.
Maybe.
It's not that long. Read it.
Yeah, okay.
Into the mic for the record.
Okay, we'll read it into the mic for the record from Allison Ring, and it was dated Friday, February 28th. And the question was, it was Socia's question is our funding insecure, shall we say? And she said, I haven't received any recent correspondence regarding our funding being at risk, but there is, of course, some concern there. In January, I received below notices about the temporary pause. Her notice was dated 1/28/25. Dear NIFWIF recipient NFWF, consistent with the attached Office of Management and Budget memorandum of January 27th, 2025, addressed to the heads of executive departments and agencies, there is in place effective immediately a temporary pause of all agency grants, loans, and other financial assistance programs. Federal assistance programs include programs, projects, and activities NIFWIF as a pass-through entity must provide you with a notice of this directive. Effective today, January 28th, you are hereby notified that your award is temporarily paused. We realize that you may have many questions regarding this action. Please refer to the OMB memorandum for further guidance. We will provide additional updates when that information becomes available. Thank you for your cooperation. there's another attached note on the 29th, the following day, January 29th, 2025. Earlier today, the Office of Management and Budget rescinded the memorandum to federal agencies directing the temporary pause of agency grant, loan, and other financial assistance programs. Currently, we have no further information on this action. Please continue to monitor your email inbox for additional communications from Easy Grants pertaining to your NIFWIF grants.
Yeah, I received that email, but since then I emailed Allison to see what happens to the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank monies. Is that in the town's bank account?
So Allison is on. I don't know, Allison, are you able to answer that question?
Yeah, so I don't have I haven't had any further correspondence regarding the NIFWIF grant, so we're proceeding. And the RIB funding, that is not a concern. That's not federal dollars, so I haven't received any correspondence regarding any concerns with that funding. But no, it's reimbursement, so we don't have the dollars in hand.
Okay.
But they're state dollars, Allison?
Yes.
Is it worth reaching out to them to see if, because weren't we using the NIFWIF as the matching funds for that grant?
Yes. Yeah.
Just wondering
Um,
If
I
is
just
it
don't know
just
what
worth
to
having
be.
a conversation with them to say our matching funding is from a federal source? Where does that leave us?
I can certainly have that conversation. I mean, I was thinking of reaching out to White House's office, who was the one that, assisted us with getting the grant. I just don't think there's any answers at this point, but I think, no, it certainly doesn't hurt to have that conversation and see if anyone knows anything further, but,
Or even just so that they're aware that we're aware that there's potentially an issue there.
yep. Okay.
Thanks, Sosha. Thanks, Mary.
Yeah.
Allison.
Thanks, Allison.
All right, committee member updates, update from town council. Does anyone have anything to share? All right, town planner, Allison, is there anything else you want to go
Well,
over?
next week, GM2 will be out to do the site visit. Unfortunately, it had been rescheduled a couple times due to the weather. So hopefully next week will be a go, Tuesday, if not Wednesday. But they have assured us that they have been working on other aspects of the project. They've been able to move forward with other data collection, not needing the site visit. So, but the site visit will hopefully happen next week. And then the hazard mitigation plan, that's about to enter, public hearing process. So that'll be a 3-week review window for the public for comments. The public hearing before the town council, I believe it's April 7th. Let me double check. April 7th, 7 p.m. But in advance of that, the plan will be on the town's website and in the town clerk's office, a hard copy. I'll circulate it to any boards I'm involved with via email as well, with the link to the town website where you can review it and provide some comments. So look for that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Update from CRC chair. I don't have anything from Judy. I guess the only thing that I would say was, I think we were all emailed this morning with this training opportunity that Anne shared that's going to be on April 1st. And I just wanted to draw everyone's attention to that. Val, you had said that you might be willing to go, which is great. It's a facilitation basics for coastal managers, all-day in-person session in Middletown. That is also the day that we have Annette Grilly coming out. So obviously don't want everyone to go to that. So Val, if you're willing to go, I think it would be great to have someone attending.
So one of the other things as well, they said they have limited registrations. So even signing up for it doesn't necessarily mean you'll get to go.
Got it.
But that's.
Okay. But that seemed like a good opportunity for someone from the committee. Thank you for taking that on.
I did just one quick thing. I did sign up for it, so if I get in and I'll pass that ticket to you. Did you get a response?
The response that I got was that they will send a
Yeah.
follow-up email.
Well,
Sorry,
hopefully between the two of you, there'll be one spot that we can get. Great. Any other updates from committee members? Okay, then let's move right along into the meat of our meeting, which is the discussion of Bridgegate Square. And Val, you have done, oh, yes, sorry.
No, that's.
That's next. Yes,
Correct.
yes. Yes, so Valerie has done a great job of collecting questions from the committee, sharing them with relevant members of the town and collecting responses. And yeah, I mean, this has been a focus of ours. It's been on the list for a very long time. So I'm really grateful to you for kicking us off further along, I guess, on this conversation. So thank you.
You're welcome. The group of them are like herding cats. And they're all busy. So Dylan is here. Thank you, Dylan, for coming. We did send you a list of questions. Can we ask you to answer them from up front? And that way you don't have to wait for me to go through everybody else's answers. Do you? Yeah. Is the button on?
It's like, no, there it is. Yep.
Do you want me to read the questions to you or
I
you
would,
just want to?
I think that's appropriate. I mean, I don't have very much to provide beyond what Mike Shea provided in prior meetings. I'm just going to kind of preface that in this discussion, so.
So the questions that we gave out to everybody, so we submitted them to Mike Shea, John, for the roads department, John Brudig from the water company,
Sure,
Jeff Wright from BIPCO, and yourself.
right.
And they were, what is the critical infrastructure that needs to be considered for sea level rise? What are the existing plans for dealing with sea level rise at Bridgegate Square? What would be most helpful as a focus for the BI, the Block Island Coastal Resilience Committee regarding Bridgegate Square? Where do you suggest we start? And is there another area on the island that you feel should be a higher priority than Bridgegate Square?
So to answer that, I mean, it's a discussion to be had with, especially when it comes to infrastructure. It's a discussion that should be had with everyone at the table. There are certain concerns that I may not see in relation to, for instance, for Block Island Power. I might not see the same, I guess, vulnerabilities to those critical assets. As far as what can be done or what could be affected, I certainly have a stake in it. The flooding in Bridgegate Square has an impact on the new storm sewer system. That's well known. I've stated that a number of times. Any flooding, infiltration into to manholes inundates the system and puts strain on the infrastructure and on the pumping stations. Limiting the inflow in through manholes is a priority, of course. Steps taken would be to provide, putting in place things that we already have, inserts under the manhole covers to stop or limit inflow into those locations. But that's not perfect. Then there's certainly limits to stopping private homeowners from pumping out their basements. I mean, it would be in a practical matter, it would be behoove the sewer district to have that discussion openly with the public, and obviously relaying those concerns. However, if your basement is being flooded and
Yeah.
you had the option to pump it into the sewer system, I mean, good faith only goes so far, you know, when it comes to our own, I guess, stake in what's important. So again, it's a conversation that is a broader conversation that needs to be had with the public. But as far as limiting flooding in Bridgegate Square, you know, I don't foresee, personally, I don't foresee the infrastructure itself being elevated or raised. The sewer, for instance, is based on gravity flow. Its design, its infrastructure is pretty much set. You would have to change the whole topography of or in engineering of the sewer infrastructure itself to accommodate that. That would be extremely costly. It would also affect all private sewer laterals. You know, everyone would have to change the plumbing in their homes. You know, you would effectively, if you're raising the level in the street, you're raising the level at the houses. I mean, and how far would that go? It's essentially a non-starter. The best case scenario is that you can limit the inundation of Bridgegate Square by protecting the inner ponds. And I don't know if there's any plan in place for flood proofing the inner pond or levees. I doubt it. Because again, that would be a significant cost to the town. Essentially, the question is what does the committee see as, like, what is the long-term scope of flooding that could inundate or affect Bridgegate Square? What would the duration be? If the duration can be sustained for 1 to 3 days, I mean, is that something we would just be willing to wait out? You know, that's the question. You know, go ahead.
Do you look at the FEMA projection, the 20, 30 years, 100 years?
We do.
So
Sure.
When-
Those, and unfortunately, the flooding impact is constantly changing. Those models are consistently changing. Planning that was in place when we were originally working on the resiliency planning has since changed. There's been some, I wouldn't say conflict, but there's been some dialogue between URI and, for instance, and our engineers in relation to, you know, where the flood lines are actually drawn.
But could you have an agreement, every department in the town, an agreement of what is the correct projection or the closest you can have? Like,
I mean, I couldn't specifically speak to that.
you cannot?
I can't speak to that.
You can.
Yeah, I can. What I can say, I can speak for the sewer district.
Yeah.
And I can say that our scope of, you know, is to raise the sewer pump stations to essentially 5 feet over the existing elevation, and to bring all the controls up to allow for consistent utilization of those stations during any time of inundation.
This is already something you have, like a.
We have a
some
plan.
Schematic design, a plan. Could you
Yes.
share that with us?
I could. I
Yeah.
would be happy to.
Great.
Yeah, and connected to that is the issue of a generator. Remember, we talked about that.
Right, backup generators would be included in that, correct?
Yeah.
Right.
You have one, and how many more do you need?
So we have a portable generator that can connect to 4 of the 5 pumping stations. The 5th pumping station is connected to a marina generator. The Old Harbor Pump Station has a triple backup system. So it's got 2 redundant, or 3 generator hookups essentially to maintain power during any storm or event.
So in your opinion, how many more backup generators are?
We would like to see, I mean, it's my priority to build or to have built a generator at the Ocean Avenue sites.
So how many of them?
That would be 2. Right. Ideally, all pump stations would have backup generators on site. I don't know how feasible that is, some of the low-lying areas. Again, that would have to be engineered. It's not something I could answer.
So your main worry is the rainfall of the sea level? What is the main worry for you? Why do you say you want to raise 5 feet?
So there's certain standards we have to meet
Yeah,
in relation to resiliency planning. That's in order to qualify for specific funding. And so we meet those requirements. That's a requirement set by, I believe, the EPA or Rhode Island DEM. So, any other questions?
Dylan, are the things that you're planning on doing, are those in the hazard mitigation plan that the town's putting
Yes.
out as well?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and I would be happy to share those plans with the committee for sure. Again, I apologize. I'm only speaking for one utility, and the scope of my experience and priorities are based on the sewer alone. So again, I can't speak for any vulnerabilities beyond the sewer district.
So my question is
Sure.
101, basic.
Hmm?
Can you explain to the public what a pump out station's function is? Because, start with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So where the infrastructure of the sewer is normally engineered for gravity conveyance. Gravity allows sewage flow from a higher point to a lower point. And you'll notice that with piping, you see a slope to convey sewage from point A to point B. Ultimately, point B is the area of either treatment or pumping. Where topography doesn't allow for gravity conveyance, there are points in the system where we need to pump it to a higher elevation and then back down to a lower. So for instance, Ocean Avenue by the hog pen, the pump station located there, it's at the base of a hill. It pumps all of the flow to the top of the hill by the police station, and then it continues with gravity conveyance towards the remainder or down the remainder of Ocean Avenue. So where topography doesn't allow for gravity conveyance, a pumping station will lift the sewage to a higher elevation and then continue with gravity. I think that answers it.
Theoretically, when you're saying raising them by 5 feet, if we have a storm surge,
Yeah, so we're raising the controls
yeah.
and the entrance of the pumping station. So where all the controls are and the platforms will be raised 5 feet above. So the working station will. The pumps themselves will remain at a lower, the standard elevation that they're already engineered at.
So if we were to have a storm surge of 7 feet, which is possible during a storm,
Sure.
during that duration, they will not be able to function?
So when you say a storm surge of 7 feet, that doesn't necessarily equate to elevation in any specific location. I think it mainly has an impact on, I'm not, I don't, yeah. So I believe it has impact as far as flowing out, by yards, but I don't believe it has the same elevation above sea level.
Right.
Because the sea level is the zero marker. So it's 7 feet above sea level, but obviously where we're standing here is significantly above.
Right,
sea
it's 7
level,
feet
so
above sea level. His
I-
pumping station may be much higher. than
High,
that.
not,
It's
yeah.
above sea
exactly.
level right now.
Right, and I don't have those elevations to go up. It's a
Thank
good
you
question.
for explaining.
Right, I'm sorry, I don't think it was
No,
clear.
I understand what you're saying.
No, makes sense.
Does flood water itself get into the sewer system?
It does through the manholes. That's, yes,
Okay.
yes.
And that then, so you have to turn everything off if they're covered, or, I mean, you know, if they
We don't
are-
turn anything off.
Okay,
unless-
but if they are totally flooded, everything just keeps going, you try.
So they're
to
submersible
essentially
if-
drain the ocean at that point?
So I mean flooded, there's a wet side and a dry side to the station. The station itself, the entrance to the dry side where we have the controls and where the pumps are sitting are, at this point out of the flood zone, first of all. But we're going to be raising that, entrance or egress up 5 feet. The pumps themselves are submersible,
You sure?
so they can remain in the sewage. It's really the controls that need to be
Right,
removed.
right. Yeah, no, I was thinking of what,
But where the flooding that impacts the station is getting into the gravity collection system through the manholes, access points.
okay.
Is that clear?
Combined system.
We're a sanitary system.
It's a combined system, you have the.
We're a sanitary, so
it's- and-
that's correct.
And you have overflow, something.
The storm drains are separate and flow to the ocean.
They never mix together.
They do not, in theory, we are not supposed to take rainwater. That's correct. But we do through inflow and infiltration, right? Groundwater. So, I mean, there's always a certain percentage that we have to account for. Oftentimes, like I said, there's individuals pumping out their basements or things of that nature that may occur. But what we saw in Hurricane Sandy, the primary concern that we had at that point was inundation into the collection system, primarily from Ballards. Ballards was compromised. Ocean water was going directly into their drains. And we were receiving all of that water into the sewage wastewater treatment plant.
How did you handle, did you shut off Ballards from, so that it
At
would
that
just
point-
flood out that way, or?
At that-
How do you handle something?
So there, at that point, it's, first of all, you'd have to have access. It has to be safe. Could you proactively
Yeah.
attack those vulnerabilities? I think you could. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But obviously then they wouldn't be able to use their bathrooms or anything like that. But
But
yes,
if-
you could effectively plug the system.
Is
I mean,
that
in a
some-
flooded system, you wouldn't want anyone to be using bathrooms if they're flooded, right? I mean.
No.
I mean, would it not make sense to have isolable areas where the flood, which are vulnerable to flooding so that. in
Well,
those
there are
circumstances-
certain places for isolation that I've already looked at. There's Painstock. There's Corn Neck Road,
Okay,
Ballards. If isolating those exterior points in the system, especially where there could be flooding, is appropriate and likely I would probably do that.
and does that require direct access or can it be done remotely?
Oh, I would have to go down into the sewer and plug it in a manhole. Yeah, I would have to plug it.
So getting
Is there,
back-
oh, excuse me. Is that something that that seems,
Feasible?
well, I'm thinking like.
It is.
the
It's
idea
it's something
of
I've planned
going
for.
down all that, is there something that could be done where there is a more, an easier way of doing that, of cutting off certain areas as you're improving?
Well, you could have isolation valves. You know, the thing about a gravity sewer, it's not, I don't foresee us going and digging up the road to put in isolation valves.
I see,
when we
so
have-
it's that intensive. I don't
Yeah,
know a ton about
yeah, I
this.
don't think that would be. And we could have curb stops and, or in a sense, or isolation valves maybe at the property line. But that would be putting a burden on, I mean, getting to the point of it, it's far easier for me to go down into the system and plug it.
But to do that, you have to have notice that it's gonna be a problem, or can you
That-
do it after the problem has
You
occurred?
can't really do it after, you have to be preemptive. You have to
Right.
say, okay, the hurricane's coming. It's November, everything's shut down. Okay, I'm just going to do this. And that is what I would do. And that's a plan in place. That's an emergency response plan. We have isolation valves, for instance, at Bimini. Because that was a point of inundation that we were concerned about,
Right.
the vulnerability of that line. If that breaks, that's why we have isolation valves there. So, but prior to any storm, we go there and we isolate Block Island Marina. So that's already standard. If there was going to be a significant storm surge like Hurricane Sandy, it would preemptively, I would go and plug the system. I have plugs ready for that case scenario.
Okay, and I mean, we've had situations, you know, in the last year or two where the road around Bimini has been completely flooded.
Right.
Is that sufficient for you to need to do plugging at that point? I mean, are you starting then to see inundation?
I have seen inundation at some points. But one of those was a broken line. It was like Bimini wasn't isolated at the time and the dock line had broken. And so once we isolated the line, it stopped. I immediately responded to a situation that, you know, that I was aware of.
I mean, do you have a sense of a specific water level at which you need to turn off or to isolate certain areas?
I would just, I respond to a storm surge scenario that would equate to a Category 1 storm.
Do you know what that is?
What the flood impact on that?
No,
would be?
what the actual surge is in a category.
So I believe that ranges, right? So depending on where it comes from.
Yeah, right. No,
Right.
I'm just trying to get a sense of.
So
of
I
what-
would,
What triggers it?
what
and
triggered-
to
what
what
would trigger
extent
me?
You're reliant on.
torrential rain,
Yeah,
storm surge, projection of storm surge,
yeah.
warnings from, from NOAA. That would indicate, that would indicate that I would have to take preemptive action. I follow the weather daily. It's part of our normal
Right,
procedures, so.
Right.
I think it's, at this point, I would have to answer your question, it's somewhat subjective.
I mean, you know, the 3 storms we had last winter,
Right.
which were pretty close to a 2-foot storm surge on top
Sure.
of a high tide. I mean, would that be sufficient to get you into isolation mode, as it were?
It would, if I'm seeing flooding, yeah,
Right.
yes, it would.
Okay.
It depends on the time of year. Obviously, if many of these events happen in the off season, thankfully. So we're already isolated at that point. I mean, at this point, Bimi's already isolated.
Okay, so you do totally preemptive isolation.
Yeah, exactly. We just shut it off.
Right.
Yeah, that way I
Okay,
don't,
that's good.
we only have to think of it once.
Yes, yeah, no, that's great, great.
Yeah.
Does the present mitigation system, well, at what point does that system become ineffectual? In other words, how much flooding would it
When there's
take?
sewage in the street. That's the best answer I have. Yeah, that's the best answer I have. I mean, what does that look like? I can't speak to that because it depends on a lot of factors. Like I said, like no one could foresee what happened at Ballard's inundating the system like it did. No one could foresee how it was inundating Bridgegate Square.
Do you have a number in your mind as to how big of a storm surge would defeat your present infrastructure?
No. No, I do not have an idea of that. Yeah,
I have a couple of.
there's a
quick-
there's a calculation that could be done. The maximum flow rate that can be received through the system. Everything is engineered to that. Do I have those numbers available? No, I don't right now, not off the top of my head.
I have a couple of quick questions. The first one's a comment question. I took a school group out to the sewage treatment plant and it was extremely informative. If members of the committee wanted to come and tour the plant, would you be willing to show us?
Absolutely, yeah, and at any point. And I will say this, I mean, we're rated for treatment of 450,000 gallons per day. The sewage plant can receive 450,000 gallons in a day, which equates to roughly 313 gallons per minute coming into the sewer plant. I have a number of 50,000 gallon tanks that are offline at any time, as long as it's not, 4th of July where everything's online and everything's running. A capacity issue in the summer would play out far more quickly than it would in the off season. We have far more capacity in detention in the off season because we are not receiving the same amount of flows that we do in the summer. So for scope of that, right now we're averaging somewhere around 53,000 gallons per day. In the summer, we'll average somewhere around 230,000 gallons per day. 4th of July, you'll be receiving, 315 to 320,000 gallons in a day. So if an event where I think a number of years ago, we almost had a hurricane on the 4th of July, that was concerning.
You might have fewer.
So it
people
depends on
if
the
you have
time of the
one.
year. And honestly, I mean, there's protocols and procedures for everything. You just try to maintain the best quality treatment you can. And that's what you do. At this point, I have no concerns about capacity. We're not even close to 80% of our design flow after 90 days. So I have no real concerns about our ability to continue treating or maintaining treatment at the sewer facility.
You mentioned education of the public. What can our committee do to convey the importance of not pumping their flooded basements into your system?
It's again, it's a good faith request. Technically, it's illegal to do so.
It
Yeah,
might be worth reminding people that.
I mean, that alone can dissuade some. But again, I mean, unless I'm going to go and smoke test everyone's home. And then follow up with the paperwork. It's generally a good faith hope that everyone understands that, they're going to be affecting or inundating everyone else's sewer system down the line. There could be potential catastrophic ramifications to that. But
Happening is, if you can get us like a paragraph describing what you just said, you can post it on the minutes and then it becomes.
yeah, I can, I mean, it's illegal. So there's basic statements that could be, I could provide. But,
Why it's harmful to your system.
sure. I mean, ultimately, it's, like I said, it's illegal to have, connections that pump outside of a metered flow. But, again, this is the discussion where it's like, you have to look at the interest of the community as well. So,
I think that would appeal to more people than
yeah,
whether it's legal
It's
or
a-
not.
sure. And I can provide something.
That would be beautiful, right? You think?
I just don't know how far that would go, or if anyone would remember it in the heat of the moment, when they're underwater. You know what I'm saying?
Big panic.
Sure.
I
Yeah.
have a question along those lines. I would think most basements that are prone to flooding would have a sump pump.
That's
So
correct.
Are you saying some pumps do not or cannot go into the sewer system?
That's correct.
They're just going below ground?
That's what they're supposed to do.
Well, that would be useful, and I mean, I'm looking at.
Yeah, I mean, I could provide, some of that stuff is, I can provide that information.
Could you turn?
So it costs money to treat sewage
It's
flow.
just
Every gallon
it's
costs money.
because in the cost of the gallon of water
That's correct.
is included. So when you pump from your basement, you don't get the money for that.
That's correct.
That's.
Yeah, and we're
So
still, it
it's
still
more
costs,
an
it costs
economical
money.
issue than,
I mean, you could say that it has a direct impact on
Yeah.
rates. I mean, I has a significant, impact on rates.
right.
But the whole purpose is not to convey the fact that it's illegal. We want to explain how it affects flooding of roads, how, that's
Sure.
our angle of things,
Sure,
right?
I understand that.
We're not-
I'll think on that. Yeah, I can think about that. Yeah, I can think about it. I don't know how much I can provide is
That's
to,
okay.
to provide anyone any incentive either way, but I'll think about it.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say something that may be helpful to you,
Hmm.
which is we are about to go online for a real-time water level gauge in Old Harbor.
Sure.
So in severe storms, knowing the time of an expected high tide, you can actually watch the water level coming up and see if it's likely to give you a big surge in,
Sure.
as I say, in real time, essentially.
Right.
That's going
So-
online. Well, it's actually online now, but it needs to be benchmarked
Sure.
precisely. But,
Yeah, primarily my main concern is the inundation of private establishments. Similar to what happened Ballard's. I think we're tightening up the system significantly. We're slip lining the whole of the gravity sewer.
Right.
So there's going to, all the cracks or separated joints and things of that nature all being tightened up. But, I have very little say about the private homeowner and what they do on their property. So, I obviously have to protect the sewer system, educate people the best I can, and I'll continue to do so. And I'll certainly make recommendations if I find any concerns. And smoke testing is something that may be done in the foreseeable future. And if that is something that is proactive, then perhaps that will uncover certain connections. But again, it's not something that can be enforced or policed indefinitely. It's a good faith hope that everyone does what they're supposed to do. It's just the way of a community. I think that's the best I have.
I have one last question. When I sent out the questions, and you said you're the only one here, that you can only speak for the sewer. So Mike's, what he said in his initial response was that he didn't think Bridgegate Square was the concern for him. He thought it was West Side Road and Ocean Ave by Bimmy. And
Sure.
that they were more problematic. Do you see anywhere on the island that you think is more of a concern to you than Bridgegate Square? Or are we kind of on target?
I would agree with Mike. I mean, in perspective of frequency, the area around Bimmy is priority. The west side. I mean, that's as far as that's outside the sewer district. So I can only speak to what's in the sewer district. Bimmy would be priority one.
He also said after that comment, but they're all connected. So
They are,
they're
sir.
all a priority.
Sure.
How that will affect Bridgegate Square, if
Right. Everything that you know, when you change the topography in any one area, you're going to affect something in another. And again, if there was levees or flood proofing in the inner ponds, I mean, it would affect, you would have to go around the whole pond because once you say you put something up at Bimmy, where's the next low point? That's where all the water's gonna go. You know, so it's gonna start inundating what?
The boat
when-
ramp.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. The boat ramp, right, there it goes, so,
silly question, but.
Sure.
Maybe silly to you, but not to me.
no, it's fine.
If and when we reach the point where the northern half of our island is cut off, which supposedly will be at 7 foot sea level rise, how does
Okay.
that affect your sewer system?
It doesn't. No, my, the sewer system stops at
Yeah.
the beachhead.
But if there. I knew that, but if there were a sewer,
What it would affect would be people's septic systems. I mean, how would they get pump outs? How would they receive services? I mean, septic pump outs would be like the last item on their priority list. I mean, they would, if they were just cut off in an event, obviously they're not going to be getting pump outs at that point. You know, if it was completely cut off, obviously, I mean, that's a plan, way outside of my scope, so.
but it's a good reason, a good logic for not having the sewer system go further out. Yeah.
And there are no plans to expand the sewer system beyond private, private homeowners, you know, on the fringes of the sewer. And there's certainly connections happening on the fringes of the sewer district. But they're primarily low pressure. Yep. Hopefully I answered some of the questions.
Thank you
Yep.
so much.
Thank you, Bill.
That was Dylan's. I spoke with John Brunig, who was planning on coming today, who I think all of you know is in the middle of a big project and was unable to come. What he said to me was, he talked to the committee a couple of years ago, and that he still had the same, it's still the same thing. So looking at Sven's synopsis of Bridgegate Square, which talks about the watersheds and that type of thing, I think he's comfortable with what we have already is what he sees. If we really needed to get him further questions, it's something we could do at a later meeting or aggregate and send out to him, and one of us could go talk with him. Mike Shea, and maybe the best way is to read it out loud. Mike Shea answered our questions. And just so people out in the audience can hear, the same questions that I asked Dylan, I asked him as well. And he put, and the first thing was his initial response was he thought that West Side Road and Ocean Ave was more problematic. And then this is what he wrote. Here are the answers to the questions as best I can do. The way I see it, stormwater for the most part is controllable in Bridgegate Square. At times, if the tide is high, the street will drain lower than if at low tide. Raising the outfall will help. When we get to the point where the intersection is flooding from sea level rise unrelated to a storm, that will be the time to reconfigure our roadways to avoid the ocean. I believe the town, state, water, and sewer departments are aware of the issues of sea level rise and are building their infrastructure in mind of sea level rise. It's the private entities that are in denial and will drag their feet in response. And then Sosha asked about the catch basins. He said there's a catch basin in front of Tigerfish, 2 in front of Diamond Blue, and all the other corners of the intersection. There's also a large chamber in front of the monument next to Shirlene's that catches a flow from Chapel Street. All of these catch basins and the chamber by Shirlene flow to a larger chamber that exists into Harbor Pond by the big exit. And then he looked at Sven's document regarding Bridgegate Square that was supplied to the committee a couple years ago. Okay, thank you. I do remember this document. For the most part, everything is accurate. Much of the bridge gauge drainage issues were addressed in 2007. The one piece that was not done was the drainage culvert from the corner of Corn Neck and Ocean by the Bagel Shop and Bank, running under the sidewalk to where it drains out into Harbor Pond next to the big exit. That culvert is very old and compromised. That is something that would need to be engineered, but I believe it could be raised inside the vault by the Bagel Shop corner to where Bridgegate drains to, and then into Harbor Pond. Prior to the paving of Ocean Ave in 2014, all the culverts that run lateral under Ocean Ave from the discharge at the big exit to across from the power company where there is another discharge were replaced with new culverts. This is one area along all of Ocean Ave that has been placed as high priority in our hazard mitigation plan, which is about to be implemented. Because it will be in our hazard mitigation plan, it opens up us to federal FEMA grant money. As of today, the town has started submitting our priorities for the statewide transportation improvement plan. Step after the rebuilding of the state garage, number one on the list is the section of Ocean Avenue from Beach Ave to Payne Stock. Within the submittal, if a section of roadway to have work done on it is subjected to sea level rise, it is to be indicated and addressed at construction. These issues are being documented in the current formats to have action taken in the future without hurting the New Shoreham taxpayer, but unfortunately things move slow. I know much of this is away from Bridgegate Square, but it is somewhat all tied together with a similar situation within the outfalls of the drainage system and backing up with storm events and sea level rise. And then the last, and we can talk about that, but the last person who spoke to me was Jeff Wright from the power company. And his response was, he felt that there would be other issues that occurred before the power company would need to get involved. He felt the power plant was fine and it's high enough up that he didn't see an issue with sea level rise anytime in the near future affecting the plant itself. But that his response was, well, if the waters start rising and the road needs to be raised, well, then we'll raise our stuff too. But he felt that he could respond to whatever issues came forth, and I was surprised, wasn't all that terribly concerned. He thought there were issues that they could deal with, and it was just something that they would work through. But he felt the roads and the sewer was probably more problematic. And if we addressed problems with in somewhere, that's something they would work along.
So the issues then for Ocean Avenue should have been handled by the state, right? And they're not. I mean, we've been leading in the town, not me.
Ocean Avenue as in the road itself,
Yeah, the catch basins.
is that all
that
from the state? I'm
Does anybody know?
not sure.
thought
I know the
so.
road itself is state.
I thought
And the
Mike said
bridge
that-
is state.
Mike said that, I remember now, Mike said that the catch basins fix was very simple and was like a low hanging fruit, and yet it had the highest priority, and that he had been in contact with the state and they are just stalling and stalling.
Yeah, he felt that until there was a significant problem, they would fix it in a reactive manner, not a proactive one.
Yeah.
Yes, I remember that conversation. So yes, you're right.
Yeah. So I wonder what this committee could do to speed that along. I mean, I'm not expecting an answer right now, but I mean, maybe we should think about that.
I think our thought was that we were going to look at Bridgegate Square, which is part of Ocean Avenue, and for grant and studies, right? That was our next step. We could look at it as a bigger area rather than restricting it to that just one spot, if that's what we're thinking. Or we move location by location.
I mean, I feel like what I've taken away from this conversation is that Bridgegate Square is actually pretty resilient. There's been a lot of improvements that have been done. Of course, it's a major hub, but it seems like Mike is really the only one who said that there's one culvert that needs
Needs
replacing, that's on the list. Seems like Ocean Ave is been identified by a number of people as being more problematic. Which is good to know, because we've been spending a lot of, we've thought about Bridgegate Square a lot, and I don't know, perhaps other people have different feelings, but that was sort of my takeaway.
remember saying to Mike, well, why don't we fix the darn catch basin if it isn't that expensive anymore? It's their job.
Mm.
But still, that is still something we could discuss. If it's that inexpensive, I have no idea how much money.
Inexpensive is relative, right?
Yeah.
So I feel it's an odd, it's an odd thing for me to weigh in on because of Bimmy.
Oh,
Right, so I think I think it's very important. And part of what we talked about was what was critical. And the committee felt that the grocery store was more critical. And are we critical at Bimmy? I think it's a real issue. We actually have reached out ourselves to Fuss and O'Neill about doing a study in that area. And I was being a little tongue in cheek when I mentioned the boat ramp, but the boat ramp is a huge issue. And then there's also, help me, Dylan, there's pipes that go under that don't have backflows. So it goes into the water, goes into the marsh, then comes back over. So we're already seeing tremendous issues there. But like I said, for me to sit there and push towards that, I feel comfortable doing.
I think the only other thing I would say, just circling back to Bridgegate Square, is that, it's what you were just saying, we're seeing issues now at Ocean Ave. At what, I think you were kind of alluding to this, Nigel, at what point we are going to see issues at Bridgegate Square? That is going to happen at some point. So question of what is that threshold? At what point does that need to start being higher priority? At what point are the systems that are working now going to start failing? And that might be an interesting thing for one of these engineering firms to try to answer for us.
So we have, like I said, as ourselves at Bimmy, we've reached out to Fuss and O'Neill and another firm in GZA who didn't answer, so I'm assuming they're really busy. But what they're suggesting is we try to get at least the community around us, if not the town, involved, because just for the study of the Bimmy site, just the study of the building and the grounds is about $200,000. That's without going into permitting and that type of thing. That's another $100,000. And obviously, as a small nonprofit, it is. And I think we're very beneficial to the community, but it's expensive for us. It's not something I'm sure we can do, or how much time it will take us to raise funds to do that. Type of thing.
And then we go all the way back. Am I on?
Oops. If you go all the way back to 2014, when the town did a study, at that point, they already suggested that we may have to face the fact of having to abandon that road and find an alternate route to New Harbor.
And that was what Mike said about it being a state road, and it's a state bridge. So which takes you beyond just the road, that they don't normally fix a bridge. They're reactive in that. They won't normally raise the bridge unless the bridge washes out. So they do it as a reactive measure.
It's the American way.
So what are people feeling about next steps, Bridgegate Square, Ocean Ave? Studies?
I just have one quick question about Beach Ave at the power company. Because when they installed that, it was installed, I think, in 2016 for a transfer of power. I forget what that was called, but it's a fairly new install, and it's related to the, Kim, do you remember what that was? It's related to Orsted and the cable. Yeah. And I know that it was mentioned as the power company not being vulnerable, when I look at the maps, it's a very low area on Beach Ave where it connects to that location where that was installed, I think 2016.
Is that where
And-
the drainage is into Trims Pond?
Yes, yes.
That
And
is clearly.
that is
vulnerable spot.
I don't
It
want to
could-
forget that. That is a vulnerable spot, yeah.
it could- Trims Pond certainly back up into the New Medical Swamp. The
Mhm.
flood from around that,
Mhm.
from the side.
I just don't want us to forget that is vulnerable, even though.
I mean, it does look like a fairly easy fix. In the-
It was raised, but.
Yeah, well, the drainage out of the swamp is quite high above the road, and then it drops into a sort of catchment and then flows under the road. If the road was certainly raised, which would prevent sort of backing up through the underside. So, and that would be important for maintaining, vehicular transport out from power company and the police station and so on too. So
And there's the other vulnerability from increasing storms. So last winter, we had that outage, and it was because of equipment failure that was due to the moist salt intrusion into the machines from the winds, from all the wind with all that salt air. So it's not just coming up from here, it's coming from there. So I'd say we should look a little more careful at assessments of our utility infrastructure.
what, can you give us more detail about what actually?
I wrote about it in the Block Island Times last winter, but I don't remember exactly when. Remember, it was about an 8-minute blackout, 8 or 13 minutes. It was very brief, and it was in the sort of latter part of the morning. And then when they came in and did they brought people in and realized it was from the wearing down of the equipment, likely because of the all that salt in the water from the winds. But I could look it up and send you the link to that. And I think they put a picture of it on the next board packet or something like that.
What I find so discouraging is if you look at the cost of the Corneck Road study being over 400 grand, right? I mean, the logical thing to recommend is to do a study from Bridgegate Square all the way to the end of Ocean Avenue North and look at it as a whole system based on what we have been discussing today. We would need to apply for a grant that size again.
Right, and I just wanted to go back a little bit about the power company. I don't think Jeff was saying there's no vulnerabilities for the power company. I think what he was saying is that there would be vulnerabilities that would come across to the other infrastructure prior to the power company,
Yeah.
and that he would respond to it. So
Yeah.
I want to make sure that I was
Yeah, you
clear
may-
with that. And I do think looking at Bridgegate Square comparatively to Ocean Ave down by Bimmy, you have a natural break between the two, which is the hill. So they're almost separate studies. Or I mean, you could look at the island as a whole with the topography and I don't know where the natural break line would be for the two. So it almost seems like Bridgegate to Bimmy, maybe not, but if you're looking at from the top of,
The police station.
from all the way from the police station, then all the way to Old Harbor, that's probably one stretch. And then you have that hill between, that you have a break between. And I'm not an engineer, so, but hydrology wise, for sure, you have two different watershed areas there.
So if you look at Ocean Avenue North, you're looking at an economic issue because of all the tourism on the pond and whatnot. So when those people get off their boats, they have to have a road to travel into town.
Yeah, what's-
It's called Center Road.
So again,
Yeah, I mean, if we lose Ocean Avenue at the far end, there's at least the road back from Center Road. So, but I mean, in the end, it's hard to see how one could save that corner of Ocean Avenue and Center.
I would be concerned about the pump outs more than traveling. Because that's where the pump out is for all those boats, is right at Bimini. And I don't know how easy that is to move,
It's a pressurized line.
so not a big deal.
Pressurized line, it wouldn't be that complicated. Just whether or not you're going to raise those docks, but, that would not be the issue. And the sewer, actually, there's a siphon, so the sewer system doesn't go across the bridge, it goes actually under the bridge, which is under the, what's that? What would it be called, at the opening to the pond?
The channel?
The channel, there it is. So the sewer goes under that channel.
Wow.
So,
I didn't know.
There seems to be, just like sitting here, can I have some public comment? Can I comment something?
we welcome it.
So I think I agree there, at this point, the resiliency of the infrastructure, again, I'm not really speaking for Block Island Power, but water, sewer, roads. Roads is going to be more reactive. There's certain, the state roads, I mean, maybe you could push for the state to reinforce specific infrastructure, sure. But again, so in the scope of sea level rise, which I've been to a few of these meetings, but I haven't heard what is the timeline and what is, and I think there's been a lot of ask of what my threshold is, but what is the threshold that you're seeing? Are you looking at 100-year flood, 200-year, 500-year? I mean, those are the frameworks or models that I guess anyone can go by right now. And in those relationships or in the scope of those circumstances, what is the length of time that those areas would be inundated before they return to normal? Or are you looking at a complete washout of Corn Neck Road? Are you looking at a complete inundation indefinitely of Bridgegate Square? I mean, are you looking at a complete inundation indefinitely of the area around Bimini? I mean, what is the scope of what you're looking at here? Because I haven't really understood, bear with me, what exactly the definition of the problem is.
Well, we can certainly, we can provide you with, the best models that exist. That
Right.
is,
Yeah.
Saying what is it?
That's okay. But do you feel like there needs to be more clarity?
Right. For instance, Hurricane Sandy, yeah, I mean, we see increased events over near Bimini. Of course, we see increased events. So obviously the infrastructure at the Block Island Maritime Institute would be, that's a private matter, but, talking about the boat pump outs, okay, maybe that would be priority one. But I mean, how long are these flood events lasting? I guess that's so are you looking at a total catastrophic failure? Is that what you're planning for? Or are you, because in a sense of, if you're looking at just a certain sea level rise, let's respond to it. And this is just me banter a little bit and talk. I mean, wouldn't we just want to establish maintaining services, making sure that people can access the police station or that the fire department can access all areas of the island? And in the case of inundation, how would that communication happen? That, okay, and this area is inundated with flow, so all fire trucks need to divert to this and, practice that in the event of that. So I just don't know, I mean, I'm kind of going on a tangent a bit, but the point I'm making is like, without a scope of like, I guess, the degree of this circumstance, how can you effectively plan? In the event of a catastrophic failure, the state will provide something. If the bridge washes out, the bridge will be rebuilt. Engineers will come and things will happen. So I guess what is the most effective or efficient use of your time? What are you really looking at as what the problem is? I think should be adequately defined. What is the length of time of inundation that, like what's your threshold for phase A, phase B, phase C, and really what can you accomplish in any of those scenarios? Again, this is just me, like, I'm just asking because honestly, coming to a few of these meetings, it doesn't seem that we truly understand the scope of the circumstances that we're trying to find solutions for.
I think
So you can't really find a solution without understanding the problem.
But I think what we start to look at is is like a moving target. That means the survey was done 20 years ago, doesn't match anymore what's happening. So we try to gather all the data about the rainfall, about the sea level, and try to see who has done the most accurate kind of survey of today.
Sure.
And we don't have it yet. Like when we look at FEMA, okay, you have the 20, 30, 50, 100 years of projection, but it's not accurate anymore. Like the amount of rainfall happening.
It's very difficult to target all the variables.
Exactly. So
And everything changes, right?
I'm assuming we will, in a few months, be able to gather as much possible of the survey of today.
Right.
And see what is the goal and what is and there is something else for the erosion comes from the sea level and from the rainfall, from what I understand.
Sure.
So the rainfall is something happening at a very more often kind of event.
Sure.
So he will speed up the erosion, not only about the ocean, but by the rainfall. So all those documents are somewhere. Some people have done some research, and we need to gather that to look at this. And until we have this, it's difficult to tell you.
Right.
We are looking at
And
this.
and until you have that, it's going to be difficult for you to find any solutions to any of this or to establish any funding.
But I really like your angle of looking at this. Establish thresholds.
Yeah.
For example, a threshold might be a house at the bluff cave falling
Right.
in, right? So we have to have mitigation plans in place when we see that house being at risk and offer that house options. It could be setbacks, it could be raising, it could, depending upon the situation.
Right. I mean, that's a combined effort with zoning and,
Yeah.
and that would be something you would
Yeah.
have to get approved. Okay, on the exterior of the island, this is what we're seeing in the event of this happening. But again, those thresholds should be established and should be concrete. They can't be based on changing models or changing targets.
What about a
That's gonna be-
thresholds that are based on a time frame, a series of time frames?
Yeah.
We know we can't be precise, but here's our 5-year threshold. Here's the 10-year, here's the
Sure.
15-year, because that's a
I
plan.
mean, you can work on averages and you can work on things that have occurred in the past to some degree.
Right, but
Um,
it gives at least a
I
lot.
mean, we're
of
seeing an
planning.
exponential increase, and things can change dramatically.
Something you said earlier was interesting. Here was that you see it after flooding, it does maybe after a day or a few days.
Yeah, it recedes. So that's what I'm saying. Are we looking at, right. And can we just wait that out? And can we just divert services for a time? So that's something that should be acknowledged
Yeah.
as far as, because I suppose, what is the scope of the problem here? when you're talking about this. And I haven't really heard that defined
No, but
in our discussions. Thanks.
I think we're probably all coming somewhat back to try anyway. I mean, in my thinking, there's sort of two different classes of things going on here. One is catastrophic failures that result mostly from storms, and it's not necessarily flooding. It can be, you know, infrastructure, physical damage.
Right.
So we have to think about losing a road as we almost did in.
Sure.
It's hard. So we have to plan for things like that and try and mitigate against that. But the other is, you know, yes, the frequency of that. So an occasional nuisance flood, which lasts for, you know, a few hours after a high tide cycle, starts to become, as time goes on, and every high tide event eventually, and it doesn't take a great deal of sea level rise to turn, you know, a 2-foot surge now into a high tide event, you know, for every other week when the tides are high.
Sure, you're seeing that in other communities around the world,
You know,
right?
So, I mean, even a 2-foot sea level rise is going to start giving us serious high tide effects.
Sure.
On, you know, alternate weeks or whatever. So, you know, we have to think about what's happening with those areas. Can we maintain emergency services during those times? I mean, people get heart attacks at high tides as well as low tides, so we have to maintain.
Right, I think,
road service.
continuation of services is really priority one.
Yeah,
That's priority one. Continuation of services. And it's, I mean, yeah, like Block Island Grocery, but it's really getting to the boat. It's really getting to the airport, it's getting to the police station, it's the fire department getting to all areas. You know, it's rescue squad getting to all areas.
Which says roads.
Right. Yeah, and so generally how, when I, at the sewer plant, I have to do a vulnerability assessment. So I just, you know, I have consequence of failure, you know, and I look at all of these areas that I can. A lot of it is subjective. A lot of it's based on experience. You look at prior reports done from other communities. You communicate often with, hey, what are you seeing as a vulnerability? You know, you have to get engaged in a dialogue about that. But then you have to compile that data and you're like, okay, these are our vulnerabilities, you know, and this, if this is the consequence, if any of this one failing, and then you prioritize those vulnerabilities. And essentially you do your best to build up resiliency or redundancy, or have a contingency plan to as far as a workaround, you know. So if you're seeing if your ultimate scope of your issue is like, okay, during those high tide events, it's Bimini and Ocean Ave, that area that's going to be seeing the most amount of inundation. I mean, that would be priority one. What are you going to do about that? Can you, like I said, I mean, what are the solutions? And then you have to just look at, these are the solutions. Are they feasible? You know, can we, you know, put them into effect? And if we can't, what's the workaround? What's the workaround? Well, how are we still going to maintain services in the case of this area being flooded every full moon or every high tide? What's the workaround? And do we have to divert services around through Spring Street or through Center Road or?
Yeah, well, you brought up earlier the business of protecting the general area along Ocean Avenue, this portion of Ocean Avenue from the inner ponds.
Right, the inner ponds are the primary
inner ponds are the major source of
right,
potential flooding.
That's correct.
And, you know, we did think about trying to control water flow in and out of at least Harbor Pond, which is, you know, one of the major vulnerabilities. The URI did a sort of a class study, which at least suggested that cost benefit was not favorable for doing.
For sure, it's not.
So, you know, we have to deal with the fact that it's going to flood, probably.
Right.
And
And so now what's the workaround?
yeah,
What's the workaround? So that's where you have to draw these conclusions out. And like, that's kind of where you're at. I'm not saying throw your hands up, but it's a pragmatic approach to handling these problems. And honestly, it's like, okay, we've done our vulnerability assessment. We've looked at our priorities. We see the consequence of failure. We have resiliency here. We can implement. We have redundancy here. We can implement. We have contingency here. You know, and that's probably the best we're going to be able to do right now. You know, this is phase one. This is phase B. This is phase C. If like 500-year flood starts happening and you start seeing water coming up to this point where you have determined by the most recent or accurate models that, okay, now we need to reassess, then that's what you do. But having studies done may not be effective without understanding exactly what your problem is, because there needs to be some direction there. You know, there has to be some scope that you're working with. And I mean, studies are important. They bring more information, but with changing topography, changing models, I mean, you spend $400,000 on, you know, based on specific topography and based on these specific models, and then all of a sudden these models are dated. You just, I mean, I don't know. I can't speak for all of it, but I question it. I'm definitely going to question it for sure. So that's all. I would just say, like, from sitting in the audience, you know, understanding the scope of the problem and having those thresholds is important. So thanks.
Thank you so much.
Anything else, Val, on this conversation? Any feedback from I know we're getting close to time, so I don't mean to rush us through, but I think we've got a lot to think about and
The only thing I was going to say is, so part of what we do is educating out to the public. And we do have a hazard mitigation plan for the town that's looking at a lot of these things. And maybe you don't need a formal study because they are costly, but to not forget that there are ways to protect or protect your home, protect your business that can be done. And so looking at the way some of these studies put forth, there's tiers. The first is, how do you protect yourself? You can move your electricity up into your top floors. How, you know, these are some of the things that when we were talking with Fuss and O'Neill's, there's such a thing as, you know, temporary flood. So there are ways to protect certain areas. And to Dylan's point is, how long we should have an idea of how long we expect some of these things to actually be worth doing. That we don't want to just kind of throw up our hands and give up just yet.
I think it's really good. I think we did some real good not problem solving.
A lot to think about.
Problem making. Yeah, I'm
It's some
happy
good
about
problem
that.
making, yes.
Yeah.
I would like to revisit back to what Dylan said about looking and clarifying what our goals and objectives are. Because I think Nigel is right. I think each of us has an idea in their head of what we expect, and we expect everybody to kind of know what we know and think that we're probably all on the same page, but we don't know what we don't know. And so I think that would be a good step for us.
I think I look forward to continuing this discussion around changing the ordinances of our town, because those can really help the private homeowner. And then we can come up with specific suggestions and bring that to the planning board. I think we should rest on this while, let this sink in, and then talk with Judy about how to flesh it out.
Absolutely, yeah. I think this is productive and thought-provoking and
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. Thank you, Val, for organizing this and getting answers from folks and continuing to keep this front of mind for us.
Two questions.
Yes, please.
The first one would be, I think it would be useful for us to have every meeting the map of Block Island so we can write and have a documentation because everybody is talking with their hand. So we can have a document about which part we believe we should look at and all of this.
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
If the city has a printer for large.
Sosha is great about always bringing that map for us.
But we
I don't know if
actually-
that serves the purpose that you're thinking of or more of a paper.
Yeah, just to be able to.
A working
have
map.
Working map.
Yeah,
for
That's a
everybody.
good idea.
Because there is some part of the island you are talking about, I have no idea where. it is.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah,
No.
absolutely.
So
No.
it's just, and the last one would be, we had a meeting with the Conservancy. And I don't know if there is any follow-up, if we are going to meet them again or.
I am not aware of our next with the Conservation
No, we
Commission.
Okay.
Yeah,
we
yeah,
haven't set,
but
we
that,
haven't set up a meeting.
Okay.
yeah, I think that should be added to this. Actually, it is one of our working groups, so I'm not sure who exactly is assigned to that.
Jean-Louis, you are.
We did
Yeah.
assign somebody, yes.
So I think,
As a matter of fact.
yeah.
I think
And,
You weren't here for that meeting, but
here.
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
teasing you.
no, but
I think adding that to an upcoming agenda is a great
Okay.
idea. Yes, so I would get in touch with Judy. She typically sets our
Okay.
agendas and having an agenda item that you lead to have that conversation.
Yeah, I was
inviting
not sure like
members.
how we process and.
It's very,
secretive. No, I'm
No,
kidding.
no, you know,
Okay.
if that's something you want to talk about, I think Judy would welcome. I know I would welcome.
So Annette Greeley is coming April 1st. Is she coming in person or is that a Zoom event?
She's going to be on island is what it,
Right.
is that the same thing as far as we can't have a quorum there either? We can only have a few people with her. Is everybody able to go?
I have not been part of the coordinating of that event. Is she meeting, she's coming on our meeting day, so I'm assuming she is attending our meeting. But perhaps there's also a field trip that, yes, would
'Cause-
probably need to only have a certain number unless we were gonna post.
What I'm leading up to is, I think it would be nice for Judy to ask Annette for, again, a little paragraph description of what she's going to be doing with us here at that meeting so that I can post that on the bib.
Could you ask Judy for that, please?
Oh, sure.
Great. So yes, we have, are there any, we've got about two more, oh, yes.
okay.
Yes.
So, so to resolve the Conservation Commission mystery, I've been assigned since I'm a member of the Conservation Commission. However, I missed the last meeting. So I don't know if they discussed it or not, the follow-up to the Coastal Resilience Joint Meeting,
Oh, okay.
but I'll find out. And then the other one is on Energy Transitions Initiative Partnership Program update. The studies are continuing, and luckily the monies that were allocated for that have not been affected. Other parts of the Lawrence Labs have been whacked hard because they were working with USAID and stuff like that, but at least the ETIP part is still safe and sound. And they're still a little nebulous on when they come back out, sometime April, May. But I encourage everyone to stay super engaged, especially once the results come through, to really figure out and define for ourselves what is the grid that we want on the island, so that we're all involved in that decision-making. Yeah?
Thank you, Kyle.
Yep, you're welcome.
Stay
Yeah.
involved.
So very quickly, this is the CRMC update, which until yesterday, their permit database was down to be replaced because I kept checking and I couldn't. I happened to check in yesterday and they said, oh, you're in luck. It's up again. Very quickly, I'm looking at all the permits. There's only 3 permits in there that are even talking about that might have any interest to us at all that aren't yet approved. The revetment around our landfill. And then the two projects on Spring Street that have to do with quarter log replacement. Those two are not yet approved. Those three different projects are not yet approved. And they all received correspondence in early February. I'm going to find out what that correspondence said, and I'll report back at our next meeting.
What
But
is the time? Are they?
it's just, if you look in, it just shows that everything's been checked off, all the boxes have been checked off, but it does not show that the CRMC has made a decision yet on those projects. I'm not sure why, but it just so happens that the two on Spring Street, which seem to be locked in lockstep, both received correspondence early February. And there was also some correspondence in early February regarding the town of New Shorehams fixing of the transfer station revetment. I do not know what that correspondence says, though. I have to go back to them now that I've seen that today and call them and see if I can get it sent to me.
Were there quite a lot of ones, continuations of ones or repairs of ones that had already been done?
There were no new projects, like the one up Scotch Beach. That was the last project of that sort that showed up. And if they actually had 50 applications in the hopper, most were already approved, but the vast majority weren't anything that would concern us. They were, driveway rebuilds and that sort of thing. So anyway, that's it.
Thank you, George, for keeping on that. Cool. Any other committee updates from folks?
I don't have it with me because I thought we would spend all this time, but we are in a position to share the discussions on Ocean Avenue North.
Oh, great. Does that, will that be able to be covered under working group updates at the next meeting? Or
Yes,
is that
it
something you
can.
would like to dedicate some time to?
No,
No, I mean, at the next meeting, do you want that to be more of an agenda item or do you want that to fall in as a working group?
I
update?
don't think it needs to be agenda item.
Okay,
Great.
great.
Then we can do it at the next meeting.
Excellent. Anything else?
I mean, maybe I should just say, we should just say, the GCA meeting has
Been put off yet again. We're supposed to be meeting in, I think it's a week today or tomorrow. Hopefully, we will eventually have our first meeting.
Great.
But we've put it off about 3 times.
Oh, goodness.
I should have mentioned the Cormac Road.
And I got more responses from the public after posting this number 2 post on Corneck Road
Oh, yeah.
and thanking us for the effort.
Great.
At
Well,
least
thank
four,
you
at least
for that.
4 such response.
That's wonderful.
So that's good to know.
Thank you for doing that. Yeah, thank you, everyone. This seems to be really great having these working groups, reports. So thank you, everyone. Upcoming speakers and immersion education sessions. Just really quick, because I know it's coming up, or is there planning for Earth Day? I think that's probably under public information and community engagement. Are you guys thinking about that?
Yeah.
Great. And then just a reminder about our next meeting with Annette on April 1st. And we'll get some more information about what that will entail coming soon. And then our next meeting is set for, oh wait, I have the wrong day here.
What was
April
dropped?
1st. April 1st. Oh, of course, April 1st. So next meeting Tuesday, April 1st. Anything else to add?
Yeah, Judy dropped one. We were going to ask a nature conservancy or any kind of conservancy for speakers to discuss the benefits of nature-based solutions.
Okay.
She maybe accidentally dropped that.
Oh, okay. Thank you for adding that in. Great. Anything else? All right. Motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
Can I have a motion?
Second.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you, everyone.
Motion to stop listening, sorry.